Alright, let's get the hell out of here.
I'll say.
I've had enough plot for today, thanks.
And despite what this screen shows, the idea that Alex is just like me is not okay.
You may have noticed that Alex no longer has 69 crit chance. I decided to just go ahead and finish that off. I cut out a bit where I went to the mine dungeon. We're now level 25.
Excellent. And by that I mean it's excellent that we're level 25, and it is also excellent that you skipped sections of the mine dungeon.
Yeah, I found that usually if I go to the mine dungeon, it's usually for about, I don't know, let's say anywhere between 4 and 5 minutes of me going through doors, and well, I think I've pretty firmly hammered in the incredible tedium that the mine dungeon provides. I don't want to force you guys to watch through all that again.
Speaking of tedium, I also note that Mount Mixtape very obviously had a couple of drop-off points to just get you back to Mount Town pretty quickly.
Yeah, they did the Skyrim trick.
Yeah. And that's alright. I just wish that a bit more like Earthbound that they did actually incorporate some method of theoretically then opening up the fast way back up as well.
Oh yeah, you could have kicked down the shortcut ladder or whatever.
Yeah.
I guess that would imply that we have a reason to go back to Mark's place.
A pretty fun instance of the shortcut ladder back in Earthbound that I recall is one of the Mr. Saturns in Saturn Valley put up one of the shortcut ladders to the hot springs, except because he was by himself, since one of his compatriots was kidnapped, he ended up making it too short.
Ha.
And so by the time you come back, you get to Saturn Valley, he just goes, yeah, I'm gonna have to do this over again. Come back when you've rescued my friends. It should be done by then.
I was going back to Onism because if you remember, that guy, Heartstrand, posted that bit about Ugu Sammy being his, I think she was his sister or something. He's hanging out at Easton U, so that's where we're going to go. I cut out about, I think it was like 10 minutes of me just wandering around trying to figure out how to get back to Frankton. But we can try and find this dude. Turns out to be the guy next to the satellite dish bearing RV, I guess. Let's give him the mixtape. This is what counts as a side quest in this game.
Oh.
Yeah. Everybody gets a level.
What?
Yay.
But okay, that's about as half-assed as I've ever seen, considering just how much effort we went through. Well, not even that we went through effort, but just how much time was given to the setup of that entire scene.
I mean, it showed up in the plot, right?
Yeah, we got this huge cutscene in which we were visited by Ghost Ugu Sammy, who was doing her Wonderwall cover, and had us talking about what the provenance of that tape was and why it might be important to return it to one person versus another person. And then once we actually get to the conclusion of that mixtape, it's literally sad guy tells us he feels better about it and gives us XP. The end.
It's like, oh, you have Sammy, or you have her mixtape. Oh, cool. Thanks, I guess.
Okay. I also want to point out a little incongruity here that I was noticing. When we ended up going to that university, we ended up just hitting the opposite coast, right?
Yes.
And for all of its reliance on fake locations, Y2K is ostensibly taking place in New Jersey, right?
Yes.
So, I don't know what New Jersey is shaped like exactly, but I'm pretty sure it's not an island.
Well, it's probably more like, I think they probably took some geographic liberties with making it a fantasy continent, you know, like Tales of or whatever.
Sure.
You know, one of these better JRPGs.
But then why call it New Jersey, really? At least
because they have to put it somewhere.
At least Earthbound had the decency to call it Eagleland.
Apologize alone. As I walked across the chewing gum and popcorn-covered floor, I imagined what the title of my quest would be.
You knew about that?
Video game.
I did actually know that.
Quickly it was becoming Apology Quest, or Legend of Please Forgive Me.
My vote was for Depression Quest until I found out that was an actual game.
Sammy.
Yeah.
that's even where life is
And
taking
Zoe
me.
Quinn doesn't deserve to be
Lately,
associated
Sammy
with
wasn't
this.
at the forefront of my thoughts. I wanted to find her, and I really wanted her to be safe.
Something tells me Alex would
But the
have
more
a
time
field
that
day with
passed
Zoe
between
Quinn.
meeting her and thinking about her, she became less real. More of a concept, more of a mythical being that only existed in my mind and the mind of the internet.
Thanks for clarifying that for us, Alex. We
Oh,
didn't get
hey,
that over the past
what's
6
up?
hours.
All right, so yes,
I came here to say I'm sorry.
Sammy's mimetic status is
My infinite
the
arrogance
closest thing
and
I think we're
constant
getting to
thinking
some
of
kind of
myself,
theme as to how
didn't
this
look at the record properly.
story is trying to come together.
I had no idea it would upset you. So basically, if you'll still be my friend, I'd very much like that.
Okay, I accept.
Okay, great. I expected to do more begging.
You can
Don't
still
push
save
your
yourself
luck.
some
Just
points, Alex.
Let it go.
Yeah.
Who are... Oh, Michael! Rory! New friends? Hey, new friends!
It was easier than I expected. Now, to convince her about getting the
Okay.
record.
Don't forget, we're only making friends with Vela again so we can get her record.
I introduced her to Claudio and Chandra.
Yeah.
We went to the burger joint and
And
talked about
again, this
everything
is
that happened
actually
up to this point.
kind of useful in terms
told
of
her about
looking
their
at
brother.
situations in
Rory
which
talked about his sister.
Alex is explicitly a
talked about
bad
his college
person
years.
in a way that
And I just listened.
kind of suits the themes
I
of
never
the
expected
narrative.
to find such an amazing.
Oh yeah,
wife.
no, this is a lot more congruous than all the other ham-handed attempts they've made to try and get us to hate
Now
Alex.
came the tricky part.
Yeah, because we had a little
I asked
off-camera
her to go
discussion
inside
about
the
this,
mind
but
dungeon with me and look for the record.
we were talking a little bit about how Alex being a bad
Well,
person isn't
ask
really
you a
useful to
personal
this
question?
story because the story isn't really predicated on the
suppose.
whether or not
So,
Alex is a good person
I
for the
was
most part.
wondering if you
When you
could
have these
tell us
when you have
about
these
the record.
unreliable narrators or
When you-
these antagonistic main characters,
What's there to tell?
part of why their story
In my
works
previous
with the
reality,
narrative
I
is
made a
meant to be
record.
about
Pretty
how
simple.
they ultimately come to
Can
improve
you tell us
themselves or
why
redeem
the
themselves.
record jacket from the
The
album
story
we made
necessarily
in another
requires
reality that
how
was
they're a
set to
bad
be
person to
released
be an
next year was
obstacle.
found in
I guess to
this
put it a little
reality?
bit more succinctly,
I have
this
no
story
idea.
could go the exact
You do
same way
realize I
whether
left
Alex
that
is in
reality
it or
behind
not.
Intentionally,
Right.
There are reasons I wanted to escape.
Yeah, no, I get it. Just
Again,
I
my
wonder if
supposition
it's
that
somehow
Vela
linked to
would make a
everything
better
going on.
main character is at
I'm
least
telling you,
partially
Alex,
predicated
you're
on that.
looking for puzzle pieces.
Well, to
where
go
there
back
is
to the
no
last
puzzle.
episode, that's probably the postmodern
talking like
part of
there's
this
some positive
postmodern
plan
RPG.
here.
You would expect reasonably
exactly do
that
you think is
Vela,
going
a
on
person
here?
who's capable, reasonably well adjusted, and,
also
and
weird.
has some interesting life experiences to share, would be the main character. And she ain't. Alex is.
Fine. If it will make you
Which
stop
is certainly an
sulking,
angle,
I'll go
to
with
be
you
sure,
into the mine
but-
dungeon. I'd
It
like to
doesn't.
know why my record is here myself.
When we're actually looking at this story in terms
I'm a
of
little
how
confused here,
Alex's
guys.
involvement in it
How the hell does
changes
Alex
the
know
trajectory
record
of
is
it.
in your mind
It's
dungeon?
very obviously the case. Well,
Because
it's,
I
it's
know
obviously
she's
the
trying
case
not
that
to
his
think about
motivation
the
to try
things
and
we try not to
get
think
Sammy
about
Park back
always end
is
up in our
what
minds.
has ultimately connected his
seems
thread
like
to
more of a
that of
stretch
these
than the
other
link between
people who
Sammy
have
and the
explored
records to
onism
me.
and thus been united by
Sure,
conspiracies and
I've got nothing else to
tragedy.
do. Let's get inside
Yes,
Vela's
Alex has achieved the lofty rank of the Mati of his
Hey,
crew.
just keep your hands to yourself while we're in there, boys. It's creepy enough letting one person in my mind.
Thank you for pointing out, by the way, how profoundly weird it is to let other people go rummaging around inside your brain.
Well, what I was getting at earlier in terms of Alex being a bad person that's something that actually affects the narrative is we've now got pretty explicit indication here that, yeah, the only reason he is engaging in this attempted apology is that he is explicitly only trying to get Vela to trust him so that he can, use her to accomplish his goal.
Yeah, well,
Which, as far as connecting these people in this story, is actually kind of interesting because it's trying to get this idea across that everyone's tragedy ultimately being their own, someone might actually go the route of trying to use the goodwill of others to address their own problems.
I do think that could be compelling by itself. really sort of want to see how the game shakes out with it and whether or not this is just going to be another situation where the game tries to make you hate Alex, but it's totally misdirected. That's another thing we were discussing off camera. Things like Chandra getting after Alex for asking the question of why was this not on the news if it was just a weird, immediate, sudden disappearance, and Chandra immediately saying because he was black. You know, that's not really something that reads fairly to Alex. It sort of feels like they just put that in there in that whole exchange to make you hate Alex.
Right, or at the very least that they were trying to score some kind of brownie points for having a modicum of social awareness under the circumstances.
This game really does read like something written by someone. You know what? YIIK is the game that Tumblr would write if Tumblr wrote a video game.
And yet did it completely wrong because they didn't really grasp any of the underlying issues that the Tumblr crowd is trying to get at.
Well, yeah, that was kind of my read on it. It's not really unreasonable for Chandra to be pissed off about the fact that was her younger brother white. Maybe the police would have spent more time investigating the situation. That's not an unreasonable criticism, and given what's been going on and given the context of the story, it's probably not unreasonable for Chandra to come to that conclusion.
Right.
It's just specifically, holy shit,
Oh,
why is this...
No.
Yeah. Yep.
Nah.
I thought you might like... Yeah, she's even got the same name.
See, I actually kind of like Valhalla, and now, it's gone and been referenced in this.
See, my experience with Valhalla is entirely secondhand and based on the Something Awful thread where somebody LP'd it. It was a pretty good LP. I have to go back and look and see who did it. I can send it to you later. But
No, I've read that thread too.
did you?
Yeah.
Okay.
Coming in as someone who actually liked the game, I'd say that, yeah, they absolutely had some fair points about how it didn't work, but I didn't feel like my experience of it was dragged down quite as much as theirs was.
No, absolutely not. You know, I think a game like Valhalla is really going to resonate differently with different people, and it's going to be divisive by nature. I think that's probably true of especially a lot of visual novel type stories like that because the gameplay is so minimal.
Mm-hmm.
I happen to like that. Also, I like this gag.
Nice.
It is the pokey flute, but it's not actually the pokey flute. It's the poke flute.
Nice. Also appreciate a bit of animated text from time to time.
Oh yeah, I haven't seen animated text like that since 1995 GeoCities.
Nice. I was thinking Death Road to Canada myself. I definitely recommend that game if you're looking for a nice adventurous roguelike.
Huh, yeah, I'll have to look at it.
But yeah, I guess...
Ow!
Ooh. Yeah, that was a little more than expected.
Oh yeah, no. I got into this area, and I was like, holy shit, the enemies suddenly do a lot of damage. I kind of walked through, literally, the last dungeon without a problem. You know, barring the pink ketchup on the floor, I wouldn't have had to really use any healing items, right?
Right.
And now they're just able to savage Alex. And it's not just Alex, I mean, granted, there's a pretty severe lack of hit points in his bar. But wow, the game really just sort of stepped it up out of nowhere.
Well, let's see where it goes with it. So I guess what I was getting at earlier about Valhalla is the fact that I think, unlike in Y2K's case, even if it did so in ways that weren't always effective or that sort of drew out some more of the unsavory elements of its fandom, I feel like the message it was trying to communicate about, you know, surviving in an seemingly impossible, unwinnable, or just undesirable situation and having sympathy for its characters in doing so is something that resonated with me a lot more positively.
Yeah, I think I can sort of understand that. That was kind of the impression I got from Valhalla as well. Like, those themes of basically, I would almost call it the theme of scarcity and trying to do the best you can with the limited resources you have, right?
Right.
That can be pretty compelling by itself. But as far as indie games that have handled that better than Valhalla did, I would probably say, like, you know, I'm totally going to show off my lack of indie cred, but I would probably say Papers, Please is a great example of how to handle the idea of scarcity and the sort of fuck you, I got mine mentality.
True. And in that case, it's definitely a case of less is more, because it paints a fairly complete picture of the kind of universe that those characters are occupying with a pretty minimal set of perspectives and circumstances to deal with. And that really speaks to Lucas Pope's ability as a story writer.
Oh, it's not just the story of Papers, Please that I think does a fantastic job of conveying it. And when you're talking about trying to establish the tone of a setting, it's not just the aesthetic, right? It's not just the themes you're trying to cover. I would say that one of Papers, Please's greatest assets for conveying the kind of world it is the color palette and the use of color in the way that everything is presented in the interface. You know how everything is just kind of very drab and very sort of post-war nuclear bunker?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's one of the best assets that the game has for conveying the sort of...
What are you making today?
Whoa.
Making some soup for dinner?
That was weird. Well, we found Sammy.
We sure have. Though what she's doing in Vela's mine dungeon is a little beyond me.
And what are they putting in that soup?
No, really.
Stop signs.
Yeah, I could go for some stop sign and telephone soup myself.
But back to your earlier question, no, it really makes absolutely no sense. I have no idea why any of this is in Vela's mine dungeon, especially Sammy. I mean, has Vela even met Sammy?
No, but I think we may have missed part of an earlier discussion in which at least part of the rationale for entering Vela's mine dungeon was understanding something more about what exactly Mystical Ultima LP Legend, man, I can't believe I'm getting that right, is about, and why she's so reluctant to have it be a part of the story.
Well, you know, maybe it's like her first album.
Yeah.
Something tells me that's not exactly what it is, because I would be giving the game a solution that's far too mundane for the questions it's trying to pose, but I'm not going to take the blanket. What kind of monster do you think I am, game?
I'll watch it be a forced decision at some point.
Talking of total monsters, check it out. It's the cultist Alex's.
Yeah. And I think I recognize that room too. At least the sliver of it that we can see.
Yeah, it looks like the hospital room, right?
Right.
The one from that totally unnecessary creepypasta thing where we had the jump scare with I Bleed Sammy.
Yeah.
Yeah, I remember that. That was like, what, 12 episodes ago? I think it happened in like 3rd episode.
Yeah, which would make it 18 at this point.
Yeah, it would be 18. Yeah, you're right.
How far we've come, and yet how little we've accomplished.
We have so little to show for any of this. I keep seeing these ramps here, and I keep thinking, wow, do I get a skateboard to do some sweet jumps? Oh good, another one of these.
I feel that the game giving us a skateboard with which to perform sweet jumps would be both appropriately 90s and kind of interesting, and thus I feel that we're doomed to disappointment.
Oh my god, Mode Wondershot. Don't hate me for this, but I think I might have forgotten to cut this mimic fight out. Look, it was really late when I was editing this, okay?
Oh, the things we do to each other.
Oh my god.
Okay, so... Alright. So, I guess I guess in retaliation, I'm gonna talk more about games I like.
Yeah, we're gonna have to strap in. We're gonna be here a while.
Alright, so as it almost kind of connects to the idea of fighting a mimic, because I was playing it recently and realized that mimics were very common and yet very not relevant in that game. I'm thinking at some point, if I were to put together a video let's play of an RPG, I'm looking at whether I can put together something decent for the game Resonance of Fate, if you're familiar with that one.
I've heard of it, but I don't know a whole lot about it.
So it's by Tri-Ace, the folks that made Star Ocean, and it's a very interesting shooter RPG because there's a kind of tactical movement aspect to it, and the idea that you can move and shoot within a certain amount of time is essentially how the battles play out. And
Does it work on time units or something like XCOM back in the day did, or is it more like
a little bit, though it's quite a bit more flexible with it, just in the interest of trying to make gameplay that's actiony and interesting.
Well, I would argue that the flexibility angle was part of what made the XCOM solution so awful. It's so flexible you can have like a ton of time units.
Yeah. And it does the same thing, but that's neither here nor there. What kind of inspired me in this case is that it's also a game in which the characters are, to some extent, both its own protagonists and antagonists. They're a group of 3 mercenaries, at least one of whom has some very severe psychological distress issues, and is regarded as a villain by at least a number of people. It's also one where the narrative, in a lot of ways, feels incomplete, or that it's not really presenting all of the information that's necessary for you to follow a single coherent plot. It's more like every chapter is a few days in the lives of, and details in between are exposed through things like talking with NPCs, or maybe seeing the occasional cutscene that establishes a few minor facts, but not really giving you a full narrative. And as a result, it means that while it feels a little incomplete, it also gives you a lot of room to fill in the gaps and with things that are interesting and ideas about what kind of interactions are taking place that's lends itself to a somewhat more creative narrative than you would otherwise.
Yeah, I understand. So it's kind of a minimalist storytelling type angle.
Yeah.
Where it basically sort of... This is something that Dark Souls, which as you know is one of my favorite games of all time, does a very good job of.
Mm-hmm.
It doesn't force the story down your throat. The story is there if you want to go look for it. It does not require that you understand the story in order to beat the game. If you don't want to understand the story, that's fine. The game's not going to hold it against you.
Right. I feel like unlike Dark Souls, though, Resonance of Fate is still a Japanese RPG where you get large FMV cutscenes where you have essentially a full narrative presented in some facet or another. It's just very different about it, and the full extent of which I'll try and explain when I finally choose to actually try and put it together. So...
Yeah, you should.
Wish me luck, Thread.
Yeah, I'd be very interested in seeing that.
I'll absolutely have you on for commentary at some point.
Oh, please do. While you were talking about Resonance of Fate, I did want to point out that we got $2,800 for beating that mimic, which puts us down...
All right.
That puts us up to $8,000. That was a lot of money back then.
Wouldn't Mom be proud of us now?
Yeah, no, that's a lot of money.
And there I go internalizing Alex again. I hate myself.
It's like, clearly this adventuring thing is working out for Alex. He's good at least one thing, right?
Yeah.
You know, murdering monsters for obscene amounts of money.
That arguably exists, given the fact that despite the fact that we're in a mental space, we're still able to acquire legal tender?
Yeah, that's a good question. When we leave Bella's Mind Dungeon, do we get to keep all of her Bella Wild fun bucks, or do they stay here when we're not here?
I will say other games have definitely presented this problem. Did you play the first Xenosaga by any chance?
I've heard things about it, most of them having to do with the absurd length of its cutscenes.
That's certainly one aspect of it, but
To answer your question, no, I'm not familiar with the currency situation in the original Xenosaga.
there's a mechanic in that game called the UMN, or Unus Mundus Network, which is basically a fully VR-capable internet. Only arguably even more so. It's this ridiculously powerful space internet, essentially.
Okay.
And one thing that you can do with it is you can explicitly use it as a way of mentally re-experiencing things. So it's what's used to justify things like your cutscene viewer and also the game's quick travel system. Because it says, see, you're never actually going to the place in question, you're just going into the mental version as recreated by the Unus Mundus Network, which is a combination of what you remember and what is actually there.
See, that's really nifty. So does the game do anything with that, where, like, the one that's recreated in the UMN is different from what it was IRL?
No, it's exactly the same. And that's honestly where that kind of problem comes in, because you can theoretically, say, miss a chest in your original traversal of the dungeon in question or the area in question, and then go into the UMN version of it and open the chest and still actually get the item.
Oh, okay, so it's not like when you go into the UMN version, it shows the chest, you just can't open or interact with it.
Nope.
That's sort of what I thought it was like.
It's positing exactly the same problem as here. It's when you go into the UMN, you fight enemies, you get treasure, and then when you get out of the UMN, it's all still there. Because from a gameplay perspective, of course it is. Why would you do the UMN? Why would you go through the UMN recreations if you didn't actually get anything out of it?
Oh, hey, Vampire of Goth LP, did you notice the title text?
Yes, I did, and it's
Wow,
profoundly...
The emo song was a 2000s thing, right?
No, it's absolutely...
Like, that was the thing when I was in high school.
It was definitely the sort of thing that I saw towards the tail end of the 90s, I think. It was...
I only knew about it from ytmnd.com. Was it on something before that?
I'm trying to think when Evanescence's first album came out. Do one of your handy-dandy little text drops at the bottom of this, and we'll
Oh,
learn
you
for
saw
sure.
that, did you?
Yes, I did.
We were 8 years off on Wonderwall.
Yep. Again, my only excuse was I only heard it a lot when I was in college. So.
Yeah, that's it for me as well, because I only heard it on the radio, because, you know, it seemed to be played on the radio all the goddamn time in that period, sort of like the... You know, it got played about as much as that one John Mayer song.
Right.
You know the one.
I know the one.
Okay, good. So, I think that's probably why I thought it was not on Morning Glory, but it was, and that was my fault. But I will never give you all false information without going back and correcting myself later.
It's much appreciated, Diacorn. Your integrity as an LPer is above reproach.
Yes, thank you. I just wish I cared more about things that actually mattered.
Well, this game certainly doesn't, so, you know.
No, as a point of fact, we've made barely any progress in this area. I think I have to take the baby blanket, but I can't bring myself to do so, mostly because I don't know what it goes to yet.
Well, maybe your morals will fail you next time.